I thought we were going to do questions after John, but here we go. Well, first, I'd like to say thank you, Margaret, and everybody at the Institute for inviting me. Hi. It's such a beautiful campus here, and I'm really excited to be at CUA because my husband and I are right now going through RCIA, so we're very excited to become Catholics. Yeah. Thank you. And I found my way to Catholicism because this is the only major organization that is getting reproduction right, getting the conversation right. And I really hope that my testimonial will encourage you guys and help you defend church teachings. I want to empower you to proclaim that every person deserves to be conceived in an act of love with their married mother and father, and not forcefully separated from their natural families and cultural heritage. Often where money is involved and they become objects, accessories, and prizes. I remember the first time I struggled to understand the ethics of a case involving reproductive technologies. I was 5 years old, folding clothes in my bedroom with my mom, and she told me that my dad was not my biological father. My biological father was an anonymous sperm donor whom we didn't know anything about, nor where to locate. I was told I was very loved and very wanted, and this is simply what infertile couples have to do. We were different, but there was nothing wrong, so to speak. A few years later, my mom divorced that dad, and I never saw him again. I was 8 years old. She remarried, and I was quickly given a new dad. But neither the first man nor the second man ever really made me feel safe in my own home. I grew up thinking that there was just something inherently evil about men. I truly thought that all men were incapable of love and incapable of appropriate parenting. But when I got older and I started spending time with friends, teenage friends, young adult friends, I started seeing how their dads treated them, and I realized that actually, there's some good guys out there and maybe some good dads too. I discovered that the number one predictor of child abuse is a kid living with a non-genetic guardian, especially a non-genetic male. I have an older sister who was adopted from Korea, and I also have a younger half-brother who was conceived naturally with my mom's second husband. And it was growing up in this unique vantage point that taught me the importance of biology in a parent-child relationship. Children living with a non-genetic guardian are 100 times more likely to face lethal abuse. The phenomenon is called the Cinderella effect, and it's verified again and again in country after country of social science research. And so after discovering this, I realized that I had to speak out against third-party reproduction, especially because unlike adoption, there's no home studies for intended parents. So biology matters for the safety of children, but this is a multi-billion-dollar industry where fertility industry agents promote and profit from children being separated from at least one half of their natural parents. Safety wasn't my only issue with donor conception. I had a lot of behavioral problems growing up. When I was young in school, elementary school, they had like the gifted program, so I had a higher IQ, but I had to beg my high school administration to let me graduate on time. I almost failed high school because of all these behavioral problems. But the safety issue is what prompted me to get up and speak out and start doing something. So at 23, I started reaching out to media and sharing my story, but it was very difficult because any media success that I had was inevitably followed up by very difficult phone calls home. For donor-conceived people who want to speak out against these practices, Being honest may lead to being orphaned. And that's why I started the Anonymous Us project. So anonymousus.org is an online story collective, and I publish insights and personal narratives from donor-conceived people, sperm and egg donors, and intended parents, and anyone who's been involved with third-party reproduction. And our tagline is anonymity in donor conception hides the truth, but anonymity in storytelling helps reveal it. So all the stories are submitted anonymously. And we've got hundreds of stories. We have a book published through University of Chicago. You guys should buy one. I'm 7 months pregnant and I really don't want to carry them home, so please. And the Anonymous Us Project has taught me this. We are seriously underestimating what kind of consequences this will have on society. Growing up, donor conception was sold to me as normal, even something worth celebrating. But the unintended lessons that accompanied that concept, I think, are alarming and worth noting. There was a time before my activism where I was enthusiastically in favor of commercial reproduction, because after all, I wouldn't exist without it. At 20, I sold my own eggs. And research shows that donor-conceived people are 20 times more likely to go on to sell their own eggs or sperm. But that's not the full story. Around that time I sold my eggs, I was also volunteering at NARAL, the National Abortion and Reproductive Rights Action League. I was fighting for the legality of partial birth abortion. Because after all, if it's okay to force a child into existence because it's so wanted, then why is it not okay to force a child out of existence because it's so unwanted? And this was the circle of logic that I couldn't help but inherit. It was my values endowment. But this conversation isn't just about the merit of choice in conception. If it's okay to buy and sell sperm, eggs, and wombs, then why is it not okay to buy and sell other human tissues and organs? If it's okay to sell one's reproductive capacities, why is it not okay to sell one's sexual capacities, like prostitution? And if it's okay to pre-sell and pre-order children via third-party reproduction, then why is it not okay to buy and sell children who are already conceived or already born? I think it's very naive to assume that decent people are not going to be very confused about those questions. So most people that I speak to, they haven't given a moment's thought about the ethical merit of third-party reproduction, because we're all busy, and that's understandable. We throw these peripheral concepts, these complicated concepts, into piles of the good and the bad, and sometimes neutral. And what we've done is we've accepted adoption as good, and adoption often can be good. You know, it's an institution that finds parents for helpless kids that desperately need a home. It's a good thing. But at some point, our concept of adoption slid, and many people now think of it primarily as a way to get kids. And we know that adoption means a severing of that biological relationship. So if adoption is good, and there's a severing of that relationship, then that at least must be neutral. So I hear all the time, well, what's the problem with sperm and egg donation? Isn't it just like adoption? And it is in two ways. If adoption is just a way of getting kids, then sperm donation too is a way of getting a kid. And if third-party reproduction severs the biological relationship, well, they're similar in that way too. But adoption is only ethical as an institution that provides parents for existing children who have been abandoned. Sperm and egg donation and surrogacy is inherently unethical because it serves as a marketplace to manufacture children for the adults that want them. In an effort to assuage the suffering of infertile adults, we've created a legal and quite explicit marketplace in children. The loophole being that if you sign the contracts and exchange the money before a specific child exists, then it's not baby selling. We've allowed this for straight couples who are clinically infertile, and because it's a for-profit industry eager to increase their profits, we've now expanded so that almost anybody can have a child this way. Even if their only claim to infertility is that they don't have the interest or ability to attract and cooperate with a member of the opposite sex. So we're now in a place where motherhood itself is being radically attacked, as you saw last night. Women are being reduced to gestational carriers, denied the dignity of the word mother, and there are people working very hard promoting and creating deliberately motherless children because they've discovered just how much money they can make doing it. And this is where the culture is taking a really big wrong turn. Because you see, when men and women cooperate and we all step up to the plate to fulfill our obligations as mothers and fathers and husbands and wives, nobody gets paid. Directly, that is. The economic benefits of stable families are actually huge. And just like the environmental and health benefits of growing and eating organic vegetables are huge, but we don't have to get into that. So we believe in mothers and fathers, and we reject a marketplace in children, but infertility is still a really big problem. What do we do about it? We all know somebody who's suffering from infertility. Likely many of us in this room. 1 in 5, 1 in 4. Sperm count globally has decreased 50% in the last 50 years. The percentage of mammals being born intersex is increasing. And there was a gentleman last night that commented on the contraceptive pill making its way into the water supply, and he skipped a couple steps, but what he said was basically true, and that there's this pouring out of synthetic estrogens in our environment, synthetic estrogens, and they're corrupting the balance of hormones, especially in the womb, and it's especially targeting male babies growing in the womb, and it's sabotaging their future health, their future sexual development, and normal reproductive health. And there's a major increase in female infertility too, partly due to age and delayed childbearing, but also due to the fact that at least 25% of female factor infertility cases can be directly traced back to an STI. So our infertility is caused by our toxic environment, as well as our toxic behavior, neutering ourselves with a pill, etc. To solve this crisis, we don't really need to create a marketplace in children. What we need to do is clean up our toxic environment and clean up our toxic behavior. The solution does require a range of genius. This isn't an easy task. Doctors, environmental scientists, anthropologists, and others all need to step up and solve and prevent cases of infertility, whether due to our bodies or our behavior. We need to be taught how to love others properly and manage our relationships so that childbearing is possible within a woman's natural fertility window, and create a culture where women will have the support of their children's fathers, not just as child support checks. But we also need to learn how to grieve and remind people that we can't infringe upon others' rights in an attempt to alleviate our own suffering. One round of IVF can cost between $8,000 and $10,000. One surrogate and egg donor pregnancy can cost up to $300,000. So we have the resources, and we have the will, and we have the intelligence to actually cure or prevent many forms of infertility. But we have to reject treating people like products And the second you put a price tag on their heads, that's exactly what happens. I participated in a documentary last year where I engaged in a conversation with a gay man who had hired a surrogate to gestate twins, conceived with his little sister's eggs and his partner's sperm. And I asked him directly, what would you guys do if you found out the twins or one of the twins had Down syndrome? And quickly he was like, well, we thought about it and we would abort. And the surrogate at the time was 4.5 months pregnant. And on a forum several years ago, before I started really being active in this, I was on this forum and I was reading, and there was a single mom by choice who had given birth to a son with apparently severe learning disabilities. And she had asked the group, does anybody know if I can get a refund? And so even though these processes create new life, please understand that they are not pro-life. And even though you hear again and again that these processes work to make people happy, please understand that they actually do not make people happier. They only delay the pain or transfer the pain to the child. Okay, Jessica Kern, the young woman you met in the documentary last night, she doesn't speak to her parents anymore. I just barely speak to my parents anymore. And I know a lot of donor-conceived people who are in the same situation. It just delays the pain or transfers the pain. Society can't really see why we would be so ungrateful. But on my site, just last night, I got this new story. I'm just going to read an excerpt from it. But it was a donor-conceived woman, and she says, she doesn't want to meet her biological father because anyone who willingly degrades women to sexual objectification and pornography, who willingly disowns the children he doesn't personally want, who willingly impregnates multiple strangers, and has these people raise his biological children and never once in his life checks in to see if his kids are healthy or happy, even alive, is not worth my time looking for. So you see, it's a lot of pain and a lot of toxic shame. And lastly, just to finish up with a quote, I have a friend who writes about these things a lot, and he's got a great quote that I love using. His name is Mark Oshensky, and he says, reproductive technologies are like building one's dream home in Yosemite Valley. It pleases the consumer and their family and friends, but it costs the culture something far more precious and universal, namely the notion that life is sacred. So don't expect a world in which the will of the sovereign consumer trumping all to resemble the one in which your parents grew up, or to be a very good place to raise kids. And I wish I could tell you guys more and get really into this, but I'm going to quit there and start questions if you want. Thank you.